You're listening to Bring Me the Axe. I'm Brian White. I'm one half of this morbid equation, and I'm joined by my co-host and brother Dave. Hey, Dave, how you doing over there?
Well, thank you for asking. I am doing pretty well. It is, as you know, the anniversary of this Bring Me the Axe podcast. I didn't save my noisemaker from last time. I probably should have.
Yeah,
but, you know.
Yeah, no, two years. Who knew?
I honestly am surprised.
I'm famously shitty at follow through.
You do have a history of being flaky.
Yeah, but here we are, 2 years, and we've got a whole year planned going forward. So we're gonna do another year at least. You guys are stuck with us.
Yeah, we're already locked in. It's too late.
It's too late. You have no choice. There is no escape.
There is no God.
Well, we're at it.
There is no way out.
Yeah, but
what was your favorite episode?
Favorite episode of last year?
Of the last 12 months.
Let's see. I think Dawn of the Dead.
Really?
Yeah.
It was our last anniversary.
Yeah, our last anniversary show, maybe. Well, no. Also, we did X-Ray. Which was a high point, a very funny episode with very funny guests, Johnny and Eileen.
Yep.
Yeah, is it good? You got yourself a celebratory beverage there?
Yeah, I opened this fancy beer. It was expensive. I bought it a couple years ago. I've been sitting on it. It's called, like I said, it's called Juicy by Hill Farmstead, aged in wine barrels.
All right.
It is fucking delicious.
Not bad. All right, so let's pretend that I'm drinking Cheerwine.
Oof, I don't know why.
I haven't been down North Carolina way, down foggy Raleigh town.
Well, that's probably for the best. It sounds like things are not great there.
So we're just gonna pretend that this here seltzer water is a fine can of Cheerwine. But what was your favorite episode of the last year?
I don't know. Now that I've asked that question, a very obviously leading question, I can't think of a single one.
I'll say, even though we came out really feeling bad about it, I think our episode about the Hitcher was a lot of fun, as it sort of dawned on us both that we just really don't like that movie.
Yeah.
me especially going in like, this is going to be fun. I love this movie. And then I watched it and I was like, you know what? I don't care for this movie.
Yeah, I gotta look now because I want to know. Let's see what we got here. I did enjoy New Year's Evil.
Okay, yeah, that was on the tip of my tongue, but I saved it.
Haunting. That was a pretty good one.
Yeah, that was a great episode. A lot of heavy duty research went into that one.
Yeah, I had a good time with Scream. Vash and Elena.
Oh yeah, Scream. Blair Witch Project.
That was not one of my favorites, but
because you had to watch Blair Witch Project. But I enjoyed the hell out of that one because it was tremendously fun to be the bad guys for once.
Yes, for once. I also enjoyed Poltergeist with Sean Apple.
Oh yeah, that was a great one too.
Yeah, so I think those were my favorites.
Yeah, our Halloween season this year was pretty good. Our Halloween 3 episode was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
It was a good year. We had a lot of great guests. We made some friends. We grew tremendously. Yeah, fucking hell of a year, man. Wait till you hear year 3, because this year,
I threw all of the themes out the window. I was like, fuck it, I'm not doing Thanksgiving. I'm not doing Christmas.
You know what? I'm glad because I'll tell you what, organizing those themed, like holiday themed lists, with the exception of Friday the 13th, organizing those holiday themed lists is like organizing like a family dinner for like a family of like 30 people. There's so much fucking thought and just work that goes into it. Yeah, it'll be great to just do whatever the hell we want for Christmas this year.
And there's not many, we're running out of Christmas movies.
Or Christmas movies that we want to watch.
Yeah, I think they are done. They're done and over. Pride Month, I think, is looking pretty good.
Pride Month's interesting this year. Yeah. Yeah, guys, I'm not kidding. We've got, like, I believe every week of the year is accounted for. Now there's no empty spaces anymore.
I'm pretty sure there are none. If there is, there might be one spot left on Patreon.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, Here's the preamble. So we practically grew up in neighborhood video stores, and the steady diet of utter garbage that those shops provided us with continues unabated to this day. There's no one else I enjoyed chopping it up with more about trashy movies than Dave. Just before we get into it, here's a little housekeeping. You want to keep up with us between episodes, you can also find us on Instagram at BringMeTheAxePod, and Dave's over there at That Queerwolf. I was on TikTok, but I don't think anybody's on TikTok anymore as of this recording.
You will be dancing no more. You'll have to fucking take your show on the road.
I know. Maybe we'll move it over to whatever Red Note is, the other, like, even more Chinese TikTok alternative.
So I just saw a thing. Occasionally I see the videos from the content creators or whatever, and I keep seeing Red Note, and I was like, "What the fuck is Red Note?"
Oh yeah. Leave it to TikTok addicts to just like find someone else to get their fix from.
Wait, is this like Russian TikTok?
No, it's also Chinese. It was like a Chinese TikTok competitor. It just did not take off in America in the way that TikTok did. But
so it's amazing that they were like, well, we can't do TikTok anymore. What's the next biggest Chinese app?
what's the other Chinese spy app that we can use?
Like, hey, everybody, I got news for you. They're all fucking spying on you.
All spying on you. Apple is probably the worst of them. So,
Facebook at this point is just like, listen up, faggots. You're all mentally ill, and we're taking your credit card numbers and your social security numbers.
Yep.
And while you're at it, you're all fired.
God damn it, man. Yeah, I got to start thinking. We got to put a little thought into our positions on Instagram going forward.
Well, I have actually given that some thought. And I gotta say, I understand why people would want to leave. I think that the rules that Meta has implemented are ridiculous and offensive and deeply harmful to society. But having said that, I am of the opinion that nobody really wins when we all just sort of walk away, because all that leaves is like a horrible echo chamber of bigotry. And so
I would, as a person, as an early adopter of Blue Sky, and also being permanently banned from Instagram for saying that I was going to kill Elon Musk and eat his heart to steal his power.
Yes. Eat your brains and gain your knowledge.
I got to tell you, the echo chamber is pretty great. It's a very comfortable echo chamber.
Oh, no, I am pro echo chamber. I just think if your reason for leaving is that people can now say these things, it is an unfortunate fact that people can really always say those things.
Always.
They
Nobody
can say
was,
it to you in the real
that's
world.
the thing. Nobody was holding anybody to account. We live in a fucking dystopia. I saw a Guardian headline today about it. It was an op-ed that was like, I knew the world was going to hell, but I didn't know our conquerors would be such losers.
Seriously. That's the worst part. It's like all these fucking like dudes, like white dudes, straight white dudes that are just like, all they ever wanted was to be like cool and part of the in crowd. And now they're like, yeah, we did it. It's like,
the thing that really gets me is Mark Zuckerberg took a look at Elon Musk and was like, you know what? I want what he has.
Yeah, which is what? It blows my mind away. But my whole point is, I understand if people want to get the hell out of there. I think we should all get off of social media, but it does serve a purpose, at least as far as this show is concerned. So I'm going to stick it out.
Yeah, we'll just make sure that we are as offensive as possible.
Oh, and we are
gonna get so fucking weird with it. We are gonna be like 15% more outwardly weird.
Yeah, I have 43 years of saying the wrong thing under my belt at exactly the wrong time.
Your timing is impeccable.
Yeah, I'm very, very good at that, of speaking without thinking. So buckle up.
And if you don't know, we have another show called 99-Cent Rental, where we cover all manner of video store madness on the weeks that bring me the axes off. Our latest episode, covering Escape from New York, my favoriteest movie of all time, is out now, and we'll be back next week with all the samurai shenanigans you can handle with Lone Wolf and Cub, Sword of Vengeance.
God, those are two great movies.
There is going to be so much arterial spray. There's going to be so much stern dudes grunting at each other.
Yep.
It's going to be great. There's going to be a baby cart loaded with weapons. It's going to be delightful. Ninjas are going to get killed.
Daigoro is going to get in on the action as well.
Yep. Ogami Ito. This is my favorite quote of his.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Pretty good, right? Right.
He was a singer. Do you know he was a singer?
I did not, but that makes a lot of sense. He does very well.
Yeah, his brother was Zatoichi.
Oh, no shit. Yeah, yeah. He's
because he was supposed to do the role, but he couldn't because he was doing these.
That actor, I'll have it when we get to the episode, but that actor is also Oda Nobunaga in Shinobi no Mono, and he is fucking rad in that movie.
See?
Also, he's firmly the bad guy in those. The Radiant Collection, amazing.
I'm gonna just pull the trigger.
Pull the trigger. Just do it. It's fucking awesome. You can also contact us directly at bringmetheaxpod@gmail.com with any questions, comments, or suggestions. Do let us know if there's a movie that you love and would like to hear us give it the business. And if you would like to support us on Patreon, you can look us up over there at patreon.com/bringmetheaxpod. A couple of tiers over there you can join. Subscribers at the $5 a month tier can look forward to my bi-weekly X-Files rewatch pod. Do you think I'm spooky? We've also got our Bring Me the Axe Millennium Edition, where we're looking at modern horror movies at a monthly pace. Our current episode is taking a look at Barbarian. You know you want to listen to it. And you can also, if you don't want to join, you can also just buy those episodes like straight out for like $3.
Yep. I think by the time this one comes out, there might actually be another one.
We'll be right on the edge of
Talk to Me.
Talk to Me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. There's also my bi-weekly DJ show, Radio Free Haddonfield. The weeks when Do You Think I'm Spooky is off. You can expect a surprising mixtape of everything from rock to disco to punk over there. Once again, that's patreon.com/bringmetheaxpod. We've got merch. You want a t-shirt? You want a hoodie?
Someone bought some today.
Fucking A. That's awesome. Yeah, man. Rep your favorite podcast. Check the show notes for the links. You can treat yourself. You ought to. You deserve it. I mean, look around you. The world is on fire. Buy a t-shirt. So lastly, if you like what you hear, you can subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube now. Search us by name and subscribe if you prefer to consume your podcast that way. And you'd be doing us a favor by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. So come on, it's our fucking birthday.
Yeah, God, if ever you've wanted to do this thing for me, it is today.
Do us a solid. 5 stars.
I need it.
It's super validation. Fucking easy. Yep. And if you listen on YouTube, do us a favor. Give the episode a like, leave a comment. We do love hearing from you guys. I just want to get that all out of the way right at the top of the show because it's a special episode. Today,
it is.
On a very special episode of Bring Me the Axe.
No one is getting molested by the guy at the bicycle shop. But
nobody's addicted to heroin.
Yet.
But the dead will rise. Here we go. Here's a taste.
Night of total terror. Night of the living dead, the dead who live on living flesh, the dead whose haunted souls hunt the living whose bodies are the only food for these ungodly creatures. Of the living dead. A bizarre adventure in fear. An experience in shock, more shattering than your strangest nightmare. Night of the living dead. A night with the dead who cannot die. A night of total terror. Night of the living dead.
A night of total terror.
Yeah, in case you forgot what it was called. I mean, they really want you to remember the title on that one. Night of the Living Dead.
Terror.
Yeah, oh my God. Oh yeah, he talks like fucking Torgo.
You forgot your complimentary crazy bread.
Oh yeah. Horrible narration notwithstanding, pretty fucking cool trailer.
It is not bad. I'll tell you what. I think I don't remember. I threw out 2 suggestions for this episode. This was one. I don't remember what the other one was.
The other one we're saving, I think, for episode 100, and so I'll keep that one a secret.
Okay.
It was also a big one.
So as with the first one, the reason I chose this one was, I think probably more than most other movies, this is the one. This, and obviously our last one was Dawn of the Dead, I remember seeing most often on sort of local channels.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that's where I first saw it. I was probably 10 when I first saw this, just on TV one night.
Yeah. And it's, for reasons we will talk about, I'm sure it is very often in other movies because it doesn't really have a copyright on certain versions of it.
Yeah, what a fucking fiasco that is. I've got notes about the copyright situation on this.
So yeah, this is sort of like in my mind space. This is one of the ones that looms largest, and so that is why we are here on this anniversary.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I think that this movie is very often. Like nowadays, I think that it sits in its proper place in the canon, but for a really long time, this movie was talked about and remembered and sort of celebrated as a real piece of B-movie schlock. And it is
strongly disagree.
It is not. It is 100% not that. It was, and I will talk about other horror movies that were released in 1968, but like this movie is like it's extremely sophisticated. It is unbelievable.
It's a game changer.
In so many fucking ways. I think that the 70s, even though this is a couple of years before it, the 70s kicks off with this movie. And it sets out some ground rules where people were like, holy shit, like we can show like guts and stuff. And Italy was like, yes, we can show guts, and went fucking crazy. And stuff just got more and more gory and graphic and intense from there. Horror became so pessimistic and nihilistic in the 70s for, social reasons that make perfect sense. But this is the fucking flashpoint. And my God, I fucking love this movie. Like I've seen it 1,000 times. And last year, I think when we were talking about which movie to do, I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna put Night of the Living Dead on tonight. And when it got over, I was like, I don't think that I have ever really fully come to terms with how pessimistic this movie actually is.
Oh yeah, dark as hell. And I'll say too, I this is another one of those movies that I always remember being like, yeah, I guess I kind of like it, but it's clunky, it's old, whatever. And then every time I watch it, I'm like, God damn it, that is a fucking awesome,
perfect movie. It's a perfect movie, and it's got like really great, like in terms of like technical filmmaking chops. There are a couple of moments that I've got footnoted in my notes that I want to point out that are incredibly cool and very innovative. It was made on like weekends in 1967 through 1968. And you would not know, like there's no continuity breaks. There's a couple of moments where like they obviously had to make a couple of like humongous dialogue cuts.
Yeah, there's like a couple really hard cuts where you're like, oh, I know what happened there. But otherwise, like it doesn't really affect the movie.
No, it looks amazing. I mean, it's a black and white movie, made it at a time when like nobody was really making black and white movies anymore. Even like I've got a note in here, like even the cheapest, cheesiest exploitation was being produced in like glorious Technicolor at the time. And they
it was because it was eventually, I think it was cheaper to just process color than it was to buy black and white stock.
Yeah. Good God, man. What a fucking movie. So let's get into it. Let's talk facts here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the year was 1968. Year of our Lord.
Beautiful.
What a
beautiful
fucking nightmare that year.
All things were going very well in America.
Was good. Everybody was just dancing in the street and nobody got murdered.
Yep.
No. So here were some other movies just to contrast against fucking Night of the Living Dead in 1968. Like The Devil Rides Out came out that year.
Boo, stupid movie.
You don't like that movie? I love that
No.
movie. That's the one where
It's got a good soundtrack though.
yeah, what is it? Christopher Lee plays essentially a character inspired by Aleister Crowley.
It's cheesy. The movie's just cheesy.
It is cheesy, but goddamn it, I love those Dennis Wheatley movies. Also, fucking Andy Milligan's The Ghastly Ones came out.
Oof. I watched that pretty recently because
I
I
did too.
grabbed that.
Oh, that's right.
That
You
Andy
bought the
Milligan
Andy
box
Milligan
set
box.
because it was like super cheap. Otherwise, I would not have paid that much money for it. But God, that movie is terrible.
I watched it also just recently as well. It's hard to quantify exactly how fucking bad it is. It looks bad. It looks like it was shot in like a heroin flop house. It's so fucking grimy and gross.
Yeah, I've seen like porno movies from the same era that look better.
Also in color, it must be noted.
Yeah.
Yep. Also, the Astro Zombies came out that year.
I also watched that pretty recently.
Pretty silly flick.
That is very goofy. I also enjoy. I love regional horror, and that is very regional, very early, and it's a fun one.
Yeah, yeah. Paul Naschy in The Mark of the Werewolf came out that year.
That is not a good movie.
You know what? I love a Paul Naschy movie. This is really in the pocket for him too. Like as we get into the 70s, he's gonna lose his edge and his shit's gonna get kind of corny. But for the moment, Mark of the Werewolf's not bad. And closing it out, a movie that's actually really good and weird as hell, The Strange World of Coffin Joe came out that year.
Oh, that's the third one?
I believe that's the third one, or it's the third or fourth. I can't remember.
Or is this the psychedelic one?
Very psych. It's the one
Yes.
where they give a bunch of people like a bunch of acid and have them look at the poster of Coffin Joe.
I think it's the fourth one.
God, I can't remember what the third one is called, but yeah, that's the one that is kind of a documentary. Because
he had gotten really famous.
You're not familiar with Coffin Joe. The scariest shit Brazil could ever come up with. The movies are fun as hell. I enjoy them. But Brazil started to kind of get confused and think that Jose Mojica Marin, the guy who made the movie, was really Coffin Joe. And so the movie is sort of him poking fun at that.
Yeah, it's like watching kayfabe wrestling, like that kind of.
Yeah, it's so good. It's a really, really weird one. So our cast and crew, the director, what else needs to be said about George Romero, who we covered in extensive detail during our last anniversary show about Dawn of the Dead. Do listen to it. It's a hell of an episode.
Never heard of him.
He's a visionary director, often hampered by budget, and his insistence that his movies be blindingly violent affairs. He was someone who was very uncompromising about weird things. Yeah.
Like he knew how to make movies one particular way, and he didn't really think he could do it outside of that, which is why he never really succeeded in a studio system.
Yeah.
Or with studio pictures, because he would try and they'd be like, you have to do this. And he's like, I don't know how to do that. I'm just going to do it all myself. Is that okay? And they would say, no, it's not okay. That's why we hired all these people. And he was like, oh, okay, I'm just going to do it all myself though. Is that okay?
And then they'd go, fine, but we're taking half the budget.
Yeah.
And he's like, God damn it, fine. Here's Day of the Dead. Shut up. Prior to this movie, Romero had been producing advertisements for local Pittsburgh TV, brands as big as Westinghouse and Heinz, local political campaigns and industrial films. His company, The Latent Image, had just landed a spot for Calgon, in which they spoofed the movie The Fantastic Voyage, and working with a significantly larger budget than ever before on a special effects heavy spot, it convinced him that his associates that they were capable of producing a feature, which led directly to Night of the Living Dead, though that was not the first movie they tried to make.
Fantastic Voyage, take me away. See what I did was a mashup.
Yeah, Calgon, blow me away. They originally he wanted to make essentially he saw himself as like a filmmaker. You know, he wanted to do like serious indie shit.
It was an auteur.
Yeah, and then they couldn't make the movie. It was like, fine, we'll make a fucking horror movie.
Yeah, just like everybody else.
Yeah, and like his original vision for this was like teenagers from outer space, like a comedy thing.
You can still see pieces of the original idea in this where they don't really feel like they belong anymore, but they were like, well, we already had it written. What do you want?
Yeah. Our cast includes Dwayne Jones making his second appearance on the pod since our episode about Ganja and Hess. You know what? That's another episode that I enjoyed really.
Yeah, that was a good one. I like that one a lot.
That was a really good one. And unfortunately, that's one that nobody listens to.
Yeah, that's the one everyone was like, we said we were doing it, and everyone was like, oh, it's such a great movie. I love that movie so much. And I was like, have you actually seen this movie? Because it's not a great movie. It's a very interesting movie.
Very challenging. I think I call it one of the angriest movies I've ever seen.
And also sad in a lot of ways.
Jesus H. Christ, yeah. Jones, unfortunately, dies young in the 80s. In the 80s, right?
I think so,
88, I think.
Yeah.
Of a heart attack, but he led quite a life. His film resume is remarkably small, but he was mostly a stage guy and very, very active in education. At the time,
very serious. He was a very serious man.
A really serious man. Like, the reason Ben comes out the way he does in this movie is almost entirely his doing. At the time of this movie's production, he was in charge of the literature department at Antioch College with specialties in English and French lit. Yeah.
Antioch College. Goddamn hippies.
We've also got Judith O'Dea, who had been a regular in Pittsburgh stage and commercial productions. Like a lot of people who enter the convention circuit, she seemed to be caught off guard by her cult celebrity status. Nowadays, she makes the rounds, seems to be having the time of her life meeting fans. I follow her on
She's
Instagram,
another one.
and like whenever she does a con, she looks like she is partying her ass off.
Yeah, she's like, she's one of those ones who sort of disappears for like 25 years, and then she starts showing up in like really small roles in like really cheap movies. Like Lynn Lowry did the same thing.
Right, yeah. Yeah, her career in feature acting stalled pretty much right after this movie, but around 20 years ago, she started appearing in low-budget horror pieces on the regular. Continues to act to this day. Like, I believe she's in a movie that's coming out this year.
Well, God bless her. She's having fun.
Yeah, like whenever I see pictures of her on Instagram, it's like whenever like Felissa Rose posts a picture, it's just like everybody is like smiling and hugging and like laughing and shit. I'm like, I want to meet her. It's like when I met Betsy Palmer. Like I could have hung out with her all fucking day.
Oh, you want to meet Felissa Rose? I have a great cameo from Felissa Rose, and she is enthusiastic.
One of these days, we'll meet Felissa Rose. And rounding it out, we got Carl Hardman. Not an actor, was actually a producer on this movie, president of Hardman Associates, an industrial film production company similar to Romero's Latent Image. He's since appeared in a couple of other low-budget movies, but he returned to producing following the release of this movie.
He also did absolutely everything on this film.
Yes, he did. He did makeup. He took photos. Probably
worked on a craft services.
I was going to say, probably worked the craft services table. Most of the cast was made up of crew as well. Marilyn Eastman plays Helen Cooper, was VP of Hardman Associates. Kira Shawn, who played Karen Cooper,
was George Romero married to Marilyn Eastman?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No. Kira Shawn, who played Karen Cooper, was Carl Hardman's daughter. Judith Ridley, who plays Judy, was the receptionist for Hardman Associates. Johnny was played by the film's producer, Russell Streiner. The sheriff.
I love that they were just like, you guys are all actors, right? And they were like, no. And he's like, yeah, you're all actors. Come on, everybody.
Yeah, the sheriff was played by the film's production manager, George Casana. And like the thing is like most of these people, they're holding it down.
Yeah, I think look, the star of the movie is Dwayne Jones. For obvious reasons, he gives a very good performance. I think he stumbles here and there. There are some times where you're like, maybe not the right delivery, but for the most part, you're like, he's a captivating presence. The rest of them, you're like, you're in the movie.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because he is so intense in this movie. Like,
yeah,
he's
a little too intense sometimes.
This is a guy who was at the time, taking seriously a movie called Night of the Flesh Eaters.
Yeah.
This dude was a pro.
Or what is it, the Night of Arabus or something?
Night of Anubis was Romero's original title for this. And they were like, nobody knows what that means, George.
He was like, well, maybe they should read a fucking book. Well, that's how I would say.
Do you have the Criterion?
Yeah.
Have you watched it? Because Night of Anubis is like a work print version.
The work print. I've watched some of it. Because I think I watched the couple, maybe last year. I watched it, and then I was like, I have never watched this part. I'm going to put it on, but I just watched the movie, and I was like, I don't really want to watch the movie again. Even though there's some differences.
Yeah. So we got a couple of taglines. Number 1, they won't stay dead.
Perfect. Love it.
Just don't do anything.
You don't need anything else.
No. And then we got this one. They keep coming back in a bloodthirsty lust for human flesh. Pits the dead against the living in a struggle for survival.
Too long.
Yeah. It occupies the middle of the poster. There weren't a whole lot of posters for this one.
No, they won't stay dead is basically the only one.
Yeah. So let's contextualize this movie a little bit, shall we?
Okay.
A lot of shit happening in 1968. So here's a short list of things that happened in 1968 that probably informed George Romero's attitude as he was making this movie. The Tet Offensive happened in 1968. The murder of Robert F. Kennedy, the My Lai Massacre, the DNC riots, and the murder of Martin Luther King Jr.
So it was a light year.
A year prior, the Detroit uprisings happened, in which the fucking U.S. military murdered a bunch of black people in Detroit.
I love how they were just like 1969, the day the music died, the day that children all grew up. And it's like, you don't know what happened like 2 years earlier?
The Watts riots happened in 1965, as did the murder of Malcolm X. The 60s, man. What the fuck?
I mean, we're basically there now.
Oh, I know. Jesus H. Christ. We're just not making art like they did back then.
Oh, we're not making art. I don't know. I don't know if that. Yeah. The pessimist in me agrees.
Yeah.
But I still want to say, like, I always remind myself, like, shit that people are making now, they're not making with me in mind. So when I see it, I'm like, well, this doesn't resonate with me. And it's like, yeah, because you're middle-aged.
Middle-aged artists, right. Step your fucking game up. The kids are killing you out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, this was originally intended to be a serious picture, and I would argue that it absolutely is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Romero and Image 10 started fundraising for some unspecified project, but the process stalled until they retooled their process for fundraising toward a proven model, a horror movie. Romero didn't want to make horror movies, evident in futile attempts to break free of the genre's gravity in the form of movies like There's Always Vanilla, Season of the Witch, and Night Riders. But it just so happened that he had a mind for horror movies. He was also a fan. Like, he read Warren and EC horror comics. He read Famous Monsters of Filmland.
He wasn't one of those guys that was just like, I hated the genre. Like, you can tell he does like it. He did not have designs on being a horror filmmaker. He wanted to be, he wanted to be fucking, what's his face? Did Rosemary's Baby. Why can I never remember this guy's?
Polanski, I know. Yeah, Roman Polanski. Rosemary's Baby, same year. Yep. Everybody treats this fucking movie in 1968 like, oh my God, can you believe the fucking gall that these people had in making this movie? And then they heap fucking praise on Polanski's horror movie.
It's because it's artsy.
Yeah.
And it was made with a lot more money. I will say it's worth remembering. It's always worth remembering, because this is as true today as it ever has been, is that horror was always the genre that you could bank on because it doesn't require much. Like, it doesn't require good actors, doesn't require recognizable people, it doesn't require a good story. It only requires some jump scares and some goofy shenanigans. And that's why there's so much of it out there. And that's why so much of it is not good.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody can make a fucking horror movie.
Yeah. It doesn't require anything.
Not everybody can make a horror movie. Everybody can make a horror movie. Not everyone can make a good horror movie.
Very, very few people can make a good one.
I would agree. Yeah. Yeah. It just so happened that he had a mind for horror movies and was good at making them most of the time.
Yeah. I see, that's where I get stuck on George Romero. Like, I recognize why he is so important. I also don't think he's as great as a lot of other people think he is. Like, I love these movies. I think there's some of his other movies are good. They're fun, but I think as a oeuvre, not that respectable.
No, like
I mean, The Dark Half, Monkey Shines.
I've watched Monkey Shines in fucking forever.
It's not good.
No, Creep Show, fucking A.
The second one, not so good.
No, but he wasn't on Creep Show 2, was he?
He wrote it.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. Again, like I've said in the past, my favorite Romero movie is not one of these zombie movies. It's actually Martin. It's fine. Here's my favorite detail of this. The initial budget was $6,000. $6,000.
I mean, they that budget ballooned.
Oh yeah,
quite a bit.
Over time it accumulated a budget a little over $100,000, which would put it near $1 million adjusted for today. So yeah.
There's lots of people out there making movies for $1 million.
Yeah. The eventual box office take after several years in release was estimated to be around $30 million. You'll never guess how much of it Romero and Image 10 did not see.
I think they ended up with something like $10,000 or something.
Yeah, they got fucked. on this. So this was released on October 1st in 1968. It beat the MPAA rating system by a month and was released without a rating. However, it has been released, like re-released several times, and was eventually, I think, certified at an X rating, but it never really stuck.
Oh my God, the fucking pearl clutchers! And don't worry, I've got some quotes from pearl clutchers coming up on you.
The film was produced while the Latent Image was still in active production mode on client work, and was produced the same year that the Latent Image was producing shorts for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It was shot in brief runs of 2 or 3 days at a time, took about 9 months to finish, and then was characteristically mishandled for an independent movie.
Oh.
Yep. Upon completion, they shopped it around to distributors who were uniformly turned off by the violence. Definitely can see that. This movie
it is a surprisingly violent movie
for a movie in 1968. And this is taking into account like gore fests like Blood Feast and shit.
Yeah, well, so I when we get to reviews, there's one review that I think very concisely explains that aspect of the movie. So I'm not going to get into it now, but it's a different kind of violence.
Yeah. Columbia didn't want it because it was in black and white, even at a time when even the cheapest exploitation movies were being released in Technicolor. AIP was interested, but wanted them to tone down the violence, add a love story angle, and change the ending to something happy.
God damn it.
I know.
Sam
I can't
Markov.
imagine, like, Romero was like, are you fucking with me right now?
And he's probably like, can you set any of it at the beach?
Can we have a new musical number?
Yes. So have you thought about putting Frankie Avalon in it?
Right. Here's Paul Bartel.
Oh, good.
The Walter Reed organization picked it up with one caveat, changed the title from Night of the Flesh Eaters, which was changed from Romero's original very unwieldy Night of Anubis, to Night of the Living Dead, which was great for Romero, but bad in the long run for reasons that we'll get into. Then it was thrust into the world of matinees, drive-ins, and nasty city grindhouses where it did brisk business, but then vanished. The cult status struck a year later when it was featured in Andy Warhol's Interview magazine, with where George Abagnale declared Night of the Living Dead was a re-released recently as a co-feature. It should open at an art house and run for at least a month because it is a work of art.
He also, that's the review I was just talking about. That's actually 1968, I think.
The Interview magazine that I got was from 69.
So
and his review is actually him just being like, listen, here's the entire movie. It's like a written version of our fucking podcast.
Yeah. He's like, hey, no, guys, here's what happens. It's so good. You're going to love it. Listen, it's about zombies, right? Okay. You're going to love this movie. It's so good. So one of the things he says is, Night of the Living Dead may very well be the only horror film in the world that is actually horrible. There's no planned comic relief, no color, no lavish settings, no pretty dresses. There are so few flaws that lingering on them would be meaningless. The point of the film is to terrify, and it does. And I think this sort of succinctly gets at the heart of this film, is that horror movies, even now, like from pretty much from the beginning to now, there's always something to offset terror, because you can't sit in sort of abject horror for very long without being very, very uncomfortable.
Right. If every
this
horror
movie is relentless,
like this, I probably would not be a horror fan. I would watch them every once in a while, but like movies that are just relentlessly dark and pessimistic, like I really appreciate those once in a while, but like if they were all like this, I would be so bummed out all the time.
And usually, like, even those, they're like, if nothing's really jumping to mind, but like for the most part, you get, gothic stories that have like big flashy sets, like, so there's something to distract you.
Right. That's why people, and like Vincent Price and
right. And that's why people say, horror and comedy go sort of like hand in hand. They live next door to each other. In here, there's no comedy. There's nothing. It's just like relentless, like awful nihilism from beginning to end. And even though it looks a little goofy to us now, there's still nothing to temper the sort of negativity of this movie. And even today, as I'm like watching it, it's you're projecting things onto it, and the era in which it was made. So yeah, this is a relentless movie that, like, you can tell this would have been horrible for children to watch.
Which they did, as a matter of fact. Yeah. The even like to that point, even the sort of silly sci-fi moment in the middle where they're like a space probe from NASA that was coming home from Venus broke up over the thing and then like it's very silly, and that would be very characteristic in like a fucking AIP movie, but it goes nowhere. It amounts to nothing. It's dismissed, and all it does is make the officials, the people who should be reassuring you that everything is okay, it just makes them bicker.
Yeah. And it pads, I mean, it's there. That's the part that I was saying feels like it's left over from previous scripts, like from when the movie was supposed to be a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
And it just kind of pads the runtime a little bit. But yeah, it's the only break you ever really get. And also, this I think leads into is a good segue to Romero's sort of outlook on the movie. He has sort of been famously, and in my opinion, a little obnoxiously coy about the themes or the meaning of it. And I think if you think about it in the context of the era, when this is coming out, like you said, you just ran through a whole fucking list of things. This is as people are starting to realize that the government is lying to them about things. This is the first time anyone has really ever considered that, with the exception of, the occasional crazy person. That people had always sort of believed that your government had your best interest in mind all the time until Vietnam, and until people started to see footage of soldiers doing terrible things, and of there's newspapers are breaking one story after another in which the government is keeping things from you or is not acting in your best interest. And so when you see these sort of bureaucrats and military people in this, I guess, kind of interstitial moment, it does sort of bring to mind the idea that people in charge are also liars. So even that is a little bit dark.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even really a break. It's a break from the terror and the violence, but it's not a break from the pessimism of the movie.
No. But like, I think that it's like all of his movies, like eventually they get to be a little bit more on the nose. And their metaphors are a little bit more pointed. This one, I think, was whenever people are like, "Oh, it's sort of like it's about racism in America, or it's about the sort of the new order of Americans kind of rising up to eat the old, like the old order." I think that's all kind of apocryphal. I think that the movie was certainly informed by everything that was happening around him. Right. Like he was a very thoughtful guy. Mm-hmm. And like, well, it got into like, unless he was making really silly stuff like Creepshow, like it kind of got it. Everything that he wrote kind of reflected his sort of opinions and his attitudes towards what was happening around him.
He grew up in a family in the Bronx which I think at the time was sort of a different racial makeup. But like in his family, his father was really ashamed of their like Latino heritage. And so he would say, because I believe his father was Cuban, essentially. Like there's how they got there is a bit of a story, but like he would say, no, that we're Spanish. We're not Latino. And it was because of the way there was such anti-Latino sentiment in the city at the time and around the country for that matter, that he kind of picked up on the fact like, oh, you're ashamed of this. You want to hide this from people. And that was sort of how he started to realize that like there are things that are beyond your control that people are going to judge you for. They're going to whatever you for. And obviously by the time you get to the 60s, this is happening for pretty much anyone who's not a white man. I think beyond the race part, because again, he's always been real cagey about that, which like I said, I find it really annoying. But because I refuse to believe that he did not have that, at least some of that in mind when they were doing this. But even if he didn't, what is unavoidable is that people were divided over everything. And this country in general was just sort of attacking each other all the time, whether it was Vietnam or gender or race or sexuality. Everybody's divided on everything. And they're kind of eating each other alive all the time. So if you want to look for a metaphor, you want to read something into it, I think at the very least you can read that into it.
Yeah. Kind of back to the release. A year later, after the interview thing, and it kind of that sort of like gave it some It gave it a little bit of spotlight among like fucking hipsters and shit.
And the negative press too. The negative press did exactly what negative press always does.
Right. And then a year later, it was released in France to great acclaim and was re-released in America where it finally caught fire. There was a huge problem, however. When the Walter Reed organization picked up the negative and changed the title card, they issued it without the copyright. You used to see this with all the old movies where a title card would display on the screen with the copyright info in small text under it. Image 10 copyrighted the original title and then handed it off to Walter Reed, who did not copyright Night of the Living Dead and issued to the movie to the public as such. The consequence of this is that the movie immediately entered the public domain, costing Romero and Image 10 potentially millions of dollars.
Because copyrights now, or have been for quite some time, they are implicit.
Yeah.
So when you make a thing, as long as you can prove that that's when you made it, it is yours. That was not the case when this movie came out. You literally had to like fucking hand stamp it yourself and like file all this ridiculous paperwork.
Yep.
And they did not.
So the consequence of this mistake would not be fully felt until the dawn of videotape, when literally anyone could issue their own release of the movie and reap the financial rewards. There are literally hundreds of this release of this movie available.
Yeah, this movie has been altered and recut so many fucking times. There's colorizations. There's a 3D version.
Ridiculous.
They're all terrible.
Yeah. My very favorite videotape release of this is a version. I think it comes from a company called Good Times Video.
I remember them.
One of those
cheap
ones,
shit.
One of those ones that just like issued everything fucking cheap, like terrible transfers and everything like that.
Yep.
The cover of the video shows the end of the movie.
Nice.
It shows them loading Ben onto the pile of bodies.
Nice.
It's like, fuck you, watch this movie, I dare you.
Mm-hmm. Or why bother? You already paid, but you paid $2.99 for it.
Yep. And that's in 1985 money.
Yeah.
These are there as a result of the copyright situation. There have been 1,000 fucking remakes.
I mean, Russo has also he did his own cut of this, I think in 98, 99 or something, where he like shot additional scenes.
In 2008. Yeah. So here we go. So in 1990, Tom Savini remakes it.
It's bad.
It's okay. It's all right. I don't really like this movie is so fucking good. Why would I watch Tom Savini's inferior version? It is
look out. Don't bait Tom Savini.
Get at me, Tom Savini. I fucking dare you.
Hey, he's got a Google alert.
Yeah. Then we got he's out at Texas Frightmare talking about us. Night of the Living Dead 3D comes out in 2006. It is dog shit, y'all.
It's garbage.
To which, did you know there was a sequel to it?
Yes.
It's called Reanimation from 2012. And all of these fucking remakes and re-releases are all like resurrected, reanimation, like that sort of thing. In 2008, John Russo's Craven Cashin comes out with new insert shots, which are glaringly obviously made in 2008. It gives the fucking Bill Hinsman zombie a backstory. Like, cause everybody was wondering where
because Bill Hinsman was like his friend.
Yeah. We got one in 2009 called Origins, which is a 3D animated prequel, I guess. It looks like the video game House of the Dead, just utter fucking trash. Look up the trailer and you will be amazed at this.
So good.
In 2012, a movie called Night of the Living Dead Resurrection came out, which sets the movie in Wales, and it sounds pretty fucking heinous. Look up the Wikipedia entry for it. The last line of the plot synopsis will tell you all you need to know about it. I am not going to say what it is. It is offensive.
Shame.
There was another modernized remake in 2014. Something in 2021 called Rebirth that appears to be another modernization with a greater emphasis on the Romero's usual, social commentary thing. That was
it's terrible. I watched it last year. It is so bad.
Oh shit! Really?
Yeah.
There's an incredibly cheap 2D animated movie released in 2021 just called Night of the Animated Dead. It's just a 2D animated version of the movie.
And I think it was written, but they put out a call to be like, who wants to come and write some of this? It was like a crowdfunded.
No. I'm going to talk about that because I was involved in that. There was a direct sequel in 2021 called Night of the Living Dead 2 with Laurie Cardeal, who apparently had nothing better to do. And then there was an extremely cheap looking indie in 2022 called A Night of the Living Dead, which is like a mockumentary or something. It was them like found footaging Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
And then just last year, the stupid goddamn Saska sisters released Festival of the Living Dead directly to Tubi, which is meant to.
You know who sucks a lot?
The fucking Saska sisters?
Yep.
Fucking turfs on top of it all.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is what being a libertarian gets you. Goddamn white people.
Okay, so the thing that you were talking about is called Night of the Living Dead Reanimated, which was a project that I was sort of tangentially involved in 2010. The guy who was sort of the ringleader behind it contacted me when I was doing Cinema Suicide and was like, would you be interested in this? And I thought it sounded incredibly interesting on paper. I wrote like a 3,000 word article about it for Scream magazine. And the whole thing was, he kept talking about it like it was this thing that people used to do all the time called reanimation, which is you take a movie and then you just like make an animated version of it.
I don't know about a thing people used to do a lot.
I've never heard of this. I've had never heard of this. I just went along with it, but it was a collaborative art project that was sort of crowdsourced from different artists who were encouraged to animate the movie, scenes from the movie. Like everybody would choose like a scene, like a segment of time, and then using whatever method they felt like, they would animate, cell animation, 3D animation. There was like stop motion. There was all this stuff. It was all synced up to the original audio track. So like you watched it front to back. It was this like wild explosion of artistic expression, on the theme of Night of the Living Dead. I loved the idea. And then when it was all finally finished, he sent me a copy of it and I watched it and it is unwatchable because like every segment is like 3 or 4 seconds long, because as it turns out, being a one-man show doing like cell animation and stuff is really fucking hard and takes forever. And so like, it's shifting art styles like every few seconds, and it is baffling. It is so hard to fucking watch. It is disorienting. I love the idea. The execution fucking sucked.
And that was your foray into filmmaking.
Yep, that's the closest I ever got.
Meanwhile, I used to write academic articles about gay pornography in the 40s.
And you did a hell of a job.
Thank you. I always thought I was pretty good at it.
The blood used in the movie, this is my last note before we start getting serious about this. The blood used in the movie is actually chocolate syrup. For the same reason that something similar was used for the shower scene in Psycho, the color red doesn't photograph well in black and white. It looks gray. Unless
you're in Italy. Then it always looks great.
Right.
But you have to be in Italy.
It looks like thick 3M paint.
Mm-hmm. Weird how that you're very, very specific.
That's how I always think of it. Actually, I think one of the episodes earlier this year we did where they were like, it was 3M.
Yep.
Yeah, the color red just doesn't photograph well in black and white. So a darker material is used as a fake out. I love that. I did a zombie thing with a friend of mine like years ago, and we used a mix of strawberry quick syrup and chocolate. 2-to-1 strawberry to chocolate syrup, and it looked like fucking real blood. It was amazing.
Delicious. And delicious, just like real blood. And also,
all the zombies had to like, we had to smear it on like bologna and shit. So all of our zombie actors were like retching their way through strawberry chocolate flavored bologna as they consumed one of our actors.
Fake blood, it scares me like the real thing.
You rock me like the real thing.
Fake blood, you scare me like the real thing. If you were the real thing, you'd scare me more. So pour it on like it's a real thing.
So hey, what the?
Well, I got a couple other things before we do.
Good.
The other one. I just want to point out too. This is a game changer in terms of a particular movie monster as well.
Oh yeah, this is the first time this kind of creature had been seen.
Yes, and so George Romero said that he had never thought of George Romero being cute and cagey. He had never thought of them as zombies. He said, to me, they were dead neighbors.
What the fuck does that mean?
I think he was being cute.
He's a sassy bitch.
He really is. Or was, anyway. God bless him. But yeah, this changes the zombie from the sort of shambling product of voodoo to the flesh-eating monster.
Before this, there was you had zombies, kind of. Like, I walked with a zombie.
They were mind-controlled voodoo.
Yeah, white things. Zombie. It was always like a voodoo thing. It was a mind control thing. Plan 9 from Outer Space did it. But these were the dead.
Yeah, and they're specifically fleshy. Now, we don't get brain eating until Return of the Living Dead, but this is the first of that. So this is sort of a big deal to introduce a new monster into, or at least a new variation on a monster. That I think that might have been the only other thing until we get to characters. They also want, because this actually isn't really the first time this had happened. There was Richard Matheson's story, I Am Legend, and then there's the filmic version, right. Last Man on Earth.
Right. And those are apparently Richard Matheson was kind of bitchy about it. I'm like, guy, come on. It is very, very loosely based on your movie. Also, your monsters are vampires, so shut up, dude.
Yeah, they are. 100%.
As much as I fucking love Richard Matheson.
I mean, I guess I'd be a little pissed if I was like, this here feels pretty familiar. Because there are similarities. It's an obvious.
I disagree.
Influence.
There are similarities in the sense that they reinforce their house to keep the monsters out, but like that's it, man. That's as close as it gets. Oh, and there's like a crowd of monsters outside of the house.
Yeah. So there's some of that, but like, yeah, I mean, it's not the same.
But like, I Am Legend is a great story. That's one of my favorites. I fucking love it. They don't have that much in common.
Well, and they also, so Romero and he said he and Russo they didn't want, like, I Am Legend and the movie, it focuses on like much later, like the aftermath of it. But this movie, he said they wanted to make a movie that showed the onset of that kind of pandemic.
Okay.
And so that was something that nobody had really done yet. And so they wanted to do that. And I would say that works pretty well. I can't think of anything else.
It's grim as hell. And the thing that I love about that is that any other movie would end this, would end this with the sort of suggestion that, like, don't worry, everybody, like they got this. The government's got this. But
nope, it's got a mean ending.
You are the feeling you are left with when this movie ends is these guys felt no obligation whatsoever to reassure you that everything was going to be okay. As a matter of fact, all you can think of is there's no way these fucking yahoos are going to get this shit under control. If I think they say like the eastern third of the country is overwhelmed.
Yeah. I mean, it has a real like December 2024 feeling to it.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna hit you with some reviews.
Oh, good, because I hear these are fucking brutal.
The movie itself initially did not get a lot of reviews. It got some local coverage, but it did get a few. And I'm gonna hit you with the first one, the Pittsburgh Press, and it says, "What kind of movie could anyone around here produce? Well, it's a science fiction horror film, Night of the Living Dead. But hold on to your seats, it isn't all that bad." I love the implication that, like, fucking, what a bunch of idiots from Pennsylvania gonna do?
Well, fucking Vincent Canby was real shitty about him, too. It was like, this movie was made by a bunch of people from Pennsylvania.
So it goes on to say, ghostly figures shimmer about, I don't know what that means. I think he meant to write shimmy about, but shimmer about and rack up innocent persons. And then there are the ghouls. I don't know why they're different. Who, for no reason at all, start to, but we better not give away any more of the plot. And so it's not quite a review. It's like an announcement, but the guy is very much like, I think you're all going to be pleasantly surprised. We're not all bumpkins.
I get the feeling that he, as he delivers this, he sort of holds his lips together with one finger.
Yeah, it's that. And then there's the Interview Magazine one, which we already talked about. The Variety one is pretty fucking savage, though. So this is Lee Beaupre from Variety. Until the Supreme Court establishes clear-cut guidelines, anytime you're invoking the Supreme Court, you know it's going to be a good film review.
I hate the Supreme Court.
Clear-cut guidelines for the anatomy of violence, Night of the Living Dead will serve nicely as outer limit definition by example. Although the pic's basic premise is repellent, it is in execution that the film distastefully excels. Apart from all those gory special effects and makeup, the production is even worse. Romero's photography is abysmally lit, and the processing appears to have been done on a 20-year-old army stock. You plebes.
Oh my God! Eat shit, Variety, and maybe
Yeah,
maybe
that's
it was
a
just
real
because like they
uppity
saw it on
review.
a shitty print or something like that. Because like the version that they got from MoMA to restore for that Criterion disc is beautiful.
Well, that's because MoMA did the restoration, and they're really, really good at it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read you the last one. This is the last thing I'm going to read you. Horror movies were fun, sure, but this was pretty strong stuff. There wasn't a lot of screaming anymore. The place was pretty quiet. The kids in the audience were stunned. Dad, don't ruin my bit.
Okay.
The kids in the audience were stunned. There was almost complete silence. The movie had stopped being delightfully scary about halfway through and had become unexpectedly terrifying. I felt real terror in that neighborhood theater last Saturday afternoon. I saw kids who had no resources they could draw upon to protect themselves from the dread and fear they felt. Now, if that were a film review, I'd be like, fuck yeah, I want to see that movie.
Hell yes.
But that's not a film review. That's some first class pearl clutching.
Yes, it is.
From one Roger Ebert. This is an article that Roger Ebert wrote in the Chicago Sun-Times about how sometimes movies just go too far. Why won't they give us a return to the Valley of the Dolls, for God's sake?
I know. The thing about this is that when they released it, so the Walter Reed organization, as we sort of come to find out, are a pretty shady outfit.
Oh, yeah.
And so they rushed it out to release without much regard for what it was. To them, it was just a schlocky cash grab. It was just a pickup. And so they issued it to the usual outfits, which were matinees and drive-ins and stuff. But like,
and remember at the time, horror movies were mostly children's fare.
For kids. Yeah. Very okay stuff. It was released when it came out in wide release, it was released as the B picture to a double feature where the A picture was Doctor Who and the Daleks, which is the one where Peter Cushing is Doctor Who.
Yeah, that's old Doctor Who. That's old, ugly Doctor Who, not hip, sexy Doctor Who.
No.
Old, ugly Doctor Who.
In a movie where his name is actually Doctor Who. It was written by somebody who had no idea what the show was about at the time. And so you contrast this movie against that one. Doctor Who and the Daleks is enjoyable as hell, but it is
nobody eats anybody else in that movie.
Nobody gets eaten. There are heroes. Everybody survives. It's a happy ending. The Daleks are driven back. It is
why Peter Cushing eats nobody in that.
Very appropriate for children to watch. And then they roll this one out. And apparently kids at first were like reacting as they should, but then as the cast gets whittled down to literally no survivors, they were just like, okay. Huh.
But also, the movie also has a very, very obvious tension to it, with like a interpersonal tension among the characters in the movie that even though they probably couldn't sort of make sense of that tension, it is still palpable in the movie. So not only do you have the terror of zombies eating people, you also have this extreme like social tension within the house. They don't know what to make of any of that. It just makes everything worse.
Yeah, like in all of the other ones, there are clear divisions between heroes and villains. The heroes always, if it's a group, they always cooperate.
Well, there's pretty clear hero and villain in this movie.
Sure.
It's a little bit gray from time to time, but for the most part, you're like, oh, look, it's the white guy who's the villain.
But the thing the broader point is that the good guys are always moving in the same direction. And in this one, the true tension is the vehicle that a lot of zombie movies capitalize on, where it's just like the zombies are just this kind of looming ever-present threat. What you might say is that
They are us.
Yeah, the real monsters are us.
Man.
We're constantly stepping on each other's toes, getting in each other's ways. We can't agree on anything. And so the problem ultimately consumes us, which is, what happens here. It's when Harry finally decides, like, I'm in charge, that the whole fucking place goes to hell and everybody gets eaten.
Yeah, you might say that man is the most dangerous game. So the article that he writes, it is just as outraged and indignant and self-righteous as anything he's ever written.
All the way back in 68.
And it is just like, I know people have a lot of respect for this guy, and I get it. He was a very good writer. Mm-hmm. He is compelling. He's such a fucking ninny about everything. I cannot think of another way of saying it. He's just like, why are you such a pansy about everything?
It's got to be a generational thing, because, like, I think about it sometimes, like whenever, every now and then, like, we'll go up do family stuff, and Dad will have seen something like really fucking violent on TV. Like they'll sit, like, they sat down and they watched like Game of Thrones or something like that, and they were cutting people's heads off, and it was like the worst fucking thing he's ever seen. Like, so offended by this degree of violence that, like, you and me are just like, that's fucking Tuesday for us, man.
You're like, we just talked about George Eastman eating his own intestines after eating a baby.
That's right.
I think he also sort of staked his claim on being that, like, I am a film critic.
Oh, I'm sure.
And that's
stuff,
a critic with a Q. You know?
I'm sure that stuff got so many fucking golf claps from his readership that he was like,
film is a serious business. And you know what? I agree. I have many times on this show, I have ranted about how film should always be taken seriously, because I think film is art, and I think art should be taken seriously. I don't think that means it has to be serious all the time. It just has to be taken seriously. Those are very different things. I think he thought it always had to be classy and fucking top shelf, and otherwise it was lowbrow and it was just for the Philistines.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Every movie won fucking points with him if it was not in English.
Right. And hey, I love a foreign film. It doesn't make it any better. It just makes it something from another country.
Right. So you want to talk about it? Want to really talk about it?
Why not?
All right, here we go. We open on a drive through the farmlands outside of Pittsburgh.
Very bumpy drive.
It's just them 68 shocks. The car comes to a stop on a lonely expanse of cemetery. Johnny and his sister Barbara bring a wreath out of their father's grave. Johnny bickers about having to make time, a 3-hour drive out of Pittsburgh, but Barbara is taking it seriously. And Johnny,
this is after he takes off his driving gloves. Which I've always find odd, because it's like, why are you wearing you're not like a stock car racer.
They didn't have power steering at the time.
That's true.
Chafed.
That's true. I remember my girlfriend in high school. That's right. In high school, had a car that did not have power steering in it.
It was like driving a fucking tank.
It was rough.
Making a turn at an intersection was like turning a ship.
Yeah, you need both hands at all times, like 10 and 2, but you might need another person to help you push. So Johnny, despite his being an obvious dick about everything, I find myself strangely attracted to him. But they do say, of their mother, Barbara's like, well, she can't make a trip like this. And I thought, well, why? She doesn't have to push the car there. She just sit in the back.
Well, it's a bumpy ride. It's like 3 hours.
I know, because it takes 10 minutes for the car to get from the opening scene to the cemetery.
It's like the beginning of Manos, The Hands of Fate.
It's like they're pulling it on a visible rope up the hill. But I do like when they park. So they park the car and they get out in the cemetery. And right before he gets out, the radio cuts back in.
Yes. Yeah.
And I love this trope, because this gets used fucking up and down through sci-fi movies, forever, basically.
But it becomes a signature of Romero's zombie movies.
It does, and I love it because what it does is that it just gives you these sort of snatches of backstory that really just kind of hint at the fact that something is wrong.
Yeah.
You don't really know what it is, but it's like, it's just it's off enough that you're like, hey, wait, you should listen to that. But he doesn't. He turns it off and gets out of the car. And it's great because the more they incorporate the news communication from TV and radio, the more isolating it becomes. You know, you really start to sense that like they are alone in that place. They're stuck while the rest of the world is sort of out there somewhere.
Yeah, and there is also like there are neat little details, story details that they do with this, where as they learn more, we hear more from it. We find out that this has been happening in America for a few days.
Yeah. Which is also kind of interesting. It's like, why don't they know that?
Right.
Because
it was
I
a different time.
They're
like,
young.
Media was much more segmented and separated. We didn't have like I mean, the you got shit from The Wire, but it came out in newspapers at the time.
Right. And there are, despite the way they look, they are, I think, supposed to be quite young, like not teenagers, but they're very early 20s.
Yeah.
So they probably wouldn't have been following a lot of that stuff. So then they get out and she's, she takes the flowers and the stone or cross or whatever it is. And he's like, why, a little spit and polish and you could sell that next year. And I thought, sell it next year. It's made of styrofoam.
Yeah. So off in the distance, they can see another man, the only other person in the cemetery, stumbling around.
Yeah, just shambling like a normal guy.
It's like a normal man.
Just
Johnny
innocently
taunts
shambling.
Barbara about being scared, uttering the immortal phrase.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
And then he indicates the other guy is one of them. But as he passes...
But then he's like, remember when we were young and we used to play? And then he's like, and Grandpa used to be like, hey, boy, what are you doing over there? And my note says, was Grandpa an old Jewish stereotype?
That was not Grandpa. That was their father that he was doing an impression of. So apparently their father was always an old Borscht Belt comedian.
Okay, well... I feel like that's something you want to celebrate with styrofoam flowers.
But they do put a cross down. So
it's the cross that's made of styrofoam. You could tell.
Little
Thanks, Criterion.
So yeah.
And he gets really uncomfortable. There is a moment I find really interesting that he gets really uncomfortable with her praying.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like, hey, come on, praying's for church.
But he kind of harps on it a little bit, which is strange because it's like, this is 1967, 68. Like pretty much all of America was religious. If you weren't, you were a communist.
Yeah. You lived in a city and you were a lesbian.
Yeah. And well, Barbara. But yeah, it's weird that he's just like, hey, come on. I mean, come on, Barbara. Like, what the fuck? Because he's real eager. It's like, dude, you just got there. Don't you have to pee or something?
Or at the very least, like, apparently you were in the car for like 3 hours. Like, stretch your fucking legs, man. Make a day of it. Like, I would not
find that candy. Get in there.
Yeah, God damn, man. I can't imagine being like getting there, putting the thing down, and then just getting back in the car for another 3-hour drive.
And even this is about as humorous as it's gonna get. And like this really hammers home, because I've seen the movie a fucking million times at this point. But like it's just another reminder of like how stark and like frighteningly humorless the movie is.
Yeah. Yeah. So the other guy comes up and he lunges at Barbara. Johnny comes to the rescue and the two of them struggle, fighting until they fall to the ground. Johnny smacks his head on a nearby grave and is presumably killed by the fall.
Maybe
he was knocked unconscious. It's unclear. It doesn't really.
I think you're supposed to. I think you're supposed to infer that he probably died when he hit his head.
So Barbara runs back to the car and attempts to get away, but finds that the keys are not there. Her attacker throws himself against the car and the windows, trying to break through. When he finally does, using a brick, Barbara releases the parking brake and the car rolls down the hill.
Good thinking on her part.
Yeah, eventually veering off the road and grinding to a halt at a tree.
Which is a very clever moment because I don't know if you were about to say it. It seemed like you
I was about to say, yeah, somebody hit that car that they were using while they were in production. And so in order to sort of explain how it happened, they just set it up so that it looks like it hit a tree. It's
a smart, if you're for the sake of continuity, because like I think if you were making a real cheap piece of shit movie, you probably wouldn't have cared.
Right.
You just would have kept shooting.
Right. If this were a Charles Band movie, he would have just let it be.
Mm-hmm. And that, like the one he made two years ago.
You're right. The one that uses Bruno Bаттay stuff from the 80s. Barbara really. So there's that. So yeah, she gets out, runs on foot down the hill, spotting a farmhouse in the distance.
I love this scene as well because the way that it's shot, it makes the farmhouse look so far away.
Yes.
And you sort of feel that like terror of this guy is coming fast behind you and the house seems like it is just too far.
It's fucking little details like that that's the thing that I think that really, I mean, apart from the fact that the movie just has such a dire tone, there are so many little details on it that sort of subconsciously elevate you, constantly like escalating the threat. Because there's going to be a point a little while later when Ben finally shows up where it's like, oh shit, we're in trouble now.
And I think that also it underscores the importance of Romero having been a horror fan. Like we recently did The Changeling, and The Changeling is a movie that is clearly made by someone who is not a horror fan.
Yeah.
And we have, because we've done this, a bunch of movies that are made by people who didn't really care for horror as a genre, but just needed to make a movie. You can always tell because the element of fear is not there because they don't watch this stuff and they probably don't spend a lot of time thinking about fear or thinking about what's frightening. And so you can tell that it was to his benefit that he was thinking about all these little ways that this would be frightening for someone.
Yeah. And it's done through little story details. It's done through weird little camera tricks and like camera moves.
The environmental stuff is, I think, very smart as well. And it's all of those things that make this movie so unnerving at times. And if this were made by someone who, what's that? Herc Harvey, when he made fucking Carnival of Souls, which is obviously a big influence on this. That's another one where you're like, you wanted to make a movie. You just settled on horror because it was the cheapest, easiest one. And same with like Manos and stuff like that. It's like you can tell you didn't obviously George Romero's a much more creative person who did understand how to make a movie, but he also understood how to make something scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
That matters.
Yeah. So when she finally finds an open door in the farmhouse, she locks it behind her, takes some time to look around, finding the place empty. Whoever was living there is gone now. Outside.
And this is another moment that I think is really smart because she's sort of walking from room to room and the house is ransacked, which is another small touch that gives that impression that like something bad happened here as well. Something bad is happening everywhere.
Yeah. Somebody left in a hurry.
Yeah. Well, or did they?
So outside, the cemetery dude stumbles around looking for Barbara. She tries the phone, but gets a busy signal. And outside, there appears to be more weirdo dudes just stumbling around towards the house. So Barbara...
Hey, dudes love ladies.
They're like, hey, there's a lady in there. Let's go
meet her. I'm going to get tangled up in the phone line and rip it down.
So Barbara climbs the steps, but doesn't make it very far. The partially eaten remains of the house's occupant presumably lies there. Horrified.
So this is interesting because it's a little bit goofy by our standards today, but not so much as I kind of remembered. I mean, it's a cheap prop.
Yeah.
Made with ping pong balls and like covered in ham and chocolate. But it looks like a pretty mangled body and especially in a fucking kids matinee, they hadn't seen anything like that.
Right.
And so
usually
it
when
really would have been shocking.
Remains in a horror movie, it was just like a fucking skeleton, like a plastic laboratory skeleton or something.
Yeah, it's the dancing skeleton on the fucking fishing line in House on Haunted Hill.
Yeah. But also like a lot of stuff that really kind of goes to that shot's advantage is the lighting, because the lighting in this movie is high contrast and stark.
Yeah, you can tell there's a big Val Lewton kind of influence on this.
Yeah. So horrified, she runs to the front door and is stopped in her tracks by headlights. And a young black man armed with a tire iron leaps out and pulls her into the house.
Enter Ben. Mm-hmm. I want to stop and talk about the character for a minute because he's interesting because he was supposed to be this kind of like a crude, lowbrow truck driver who did a lot of swearing and talking to ladies, in a gruff manner. And so Romero said when he cast Dwayne Jones, he realized that that didn't work for this character. And so he sort of built in.
Jones came in and he read for the part, but he delivered it kind of in the way that he does it in the movie.
Yeah.
And I think that Romero saw an opportunity to be a little edgy in casting a black man in the lead.
Well, now wait. He says that absolutely not. I don't know why you would think that. Bullshit entirely.
In past episodes of this show, I have been on the fence about that, but upon really studying this, I was like, okay, no, you're right over there. He 100% saw an opportunity to do something kind of edgy, and he did it. But the read that Dwayne Jones gave him was basically the Ben in the movie. And he was like, okay, hold on, I'm going to rewrite this character. And he basically changed him to the sort of level-headed guy who's got his shit together.
Yeah, like he comes across like Sidney Poitier in the heat of the night. Like he's very commanding. He's very straightforward. He's very like just everything's from the chest. And so making him this kind of lowbrow dude, it just would have been ridiculous. It wouldn't have read at all. You would have been like, this is the wrong person for this. But I think he saw an opportunity in that Dwayne Jones is a pretty good actor. And so he was like, well, shit, everybody else is just my fucking friend. So I'm going to take this guy and put him in the movie. But later, I guess there was some talk about like how he had a lot of concerns about like how Ben's character interacts with everybody, but I think mostly with Barbara. And we'll talk about why in a little bit, but like he was like, I don't know how audiences are going to feel about this very commanding black man in a room full of white people, you know, slapping a lady.
Right.
And I guess at the time, George Romero was like, tut, 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 it'll be fine. And I think later on, he was like, I regret not listening to him not because it made for a worse movie, but he was like, I regret not having taken his concerns seriously as a person, as an actor, as everything, which I think is very respectable.
Right.
But it's very interesting to see because the way this character interacts with everybody is going to change the framing of the movie, because you can't ignore it. Like, even if you look at it today, having seen lots of movies, not quite like this, but with sort of commanding black leads, it probably wouldn't have been that strange to watch this now and be like, oh yeah, he's just the fucking guy in the movie. But if you put it back in its historical context, like all the stuff you just listed, there's race riots going on all over the place in Watts, Detroit, Newark, like fucking ripping up the country. And just all this division, and it really gives everything a different tone, especially later on. There's a monologue that he kind of gives that I think changes the way that I would have changes the way I see the movie now. And it could not have been lost on at least most of the adults watching the movie in 1968, 69.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
Which is why I think it's always been kind of ridiculous that he was like, I just cast the best actor. Like maybe he thought he was doing the right thing by like not politicizing it, but it's like, dude, everybody can fucking see it. Like,
I know. I will give a little credence to that, because given the sort of quality of acting in this movie, his co-stars are, I think, the only other cast member. Well, Judith O'Dea was also an actress, but like her performance is.
She gets obnoxious pretty quickly.
Yeah. And the only other guy who was like a cast member who was an actor is the guy who plays Tom. And
which I find shocking because he's one of the worst ones.
He's not horrible, but like some of the people in this movie who were not actors, who were just like producers or people who worked for the fucking producers, do way better than him. And so put up against some of the people who are sort of like coming in and reading for this movie, or that they were just actively casting, Dwayne Jones is a fucking actor.
Yeah.
And so
he comes across as a powerhouse in this movie.
So yeah, like I think that there's definitely something to that. Like he was just the best guy, but like,
sure,
it's stupid to say like,
but there were
not other factors at
right. You'd have to be oblivious and an idiot to not realize that this would absolutely change the character, the movie, how the audience experiences the movie. And we all know that George Romero was not an idiot. He was not thoughtless, and he was not oblivious. So it's like, you should have just said it.
Right.
Because you're not doing anybody any fucking favors, and you look like you're being an asshole.
Yeah. So Ben tries to talk to Barbara, who has been reduced to a catatonic child. But
big mistake there. And I that was another one that I think George Romero was like, I kind of wish I hadn't done that, because she's not a bad actor, but she comes across as one in this as a result.
No, and his original idea for her was like, she was more of like a capable sort of teammate for him. She was more like
this is like Faster Pussycat, but with zombies.
Right. She was more like Lori Cardille in Day of the Dead. Right. And then eventually they were like, we'll just, we'll sort of like make her kind of like dead weight or something like that. I don't know.
And she really is like, oh God.
Just throw her out the fucking door, feed her to the zombies, get it over with. So yeah.
Acceleration theory.
He gets nowhere, eventually finding the corpse on the steps. He gathers some supplies, trying to get through to Barbara, becomes combative and even more unhelpful. Spotting some more of those things outside, he runs out to find them trashing his car. Close up,
which I think is this is another one of those neat touches, because it's like it suggests they're not just animals. They're not just looking for food. They're destructive in another kind of way.
Right. He's going to throw that shit away in the sequels.
Yeah.
And just sort of make them driven entirely by hunger. But like in this one, they use tools and stuff like that.
Which is, I think, interesting that's the thing. And I don't think we're going to get much into it in this, but the idea that he would have had to dumb it down for later iterations of the movie, like in the sequels, he's going to make them, until the very end, when he does sort of come back, circles back to this idea, but like they're just, movie monsters looking to tear you apart and eat your brains.
Yeah,
but
they're just an appetite, really.
Yeah.
So close-ups on the zombies reveal that they're all mangled and messed up in some ways, implying that they're dead.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
So there was apparently, and now I've been unable to find stuff that kind of corroborates this. I found this one passage that was supposedly, it was from an interview with Dwayne Jones before his death. And he remarks that the ending was kind of up in the air because when they went to start shooting this movie, they only had half the script.
Yeah, I think a lot of the script is improvised.
Yeah. And so the only stuff that they had written up to that point was up to the point where Harry and Tom come upstairs. And like, then from there, they kind of had to figure it out. And so George goes off to sort of like do latent image work. And John Russo kind of continues the writing process and sort of writes the second half of the movie, where the topic comes up of whether or not that Ben should die in the end. And Jones insisted that he die, stating, "I convinced George that the black community would rather see me dead than saved after all that had gone on, in a corny and symbolically confusing way." He says the heroes never die in American movies, and the jolt of that and the double jolt of the hero being black seemed like a double-barreled whammy.
I can see, given what I know about Dwayne Jones, I can see him maybe having that feeling. And I also think, because he was very like, sort of erudite black professor. And from what I understand, a very thoughtful person. And I can see that at a time when we're sort of on the cusp of blaxploitation stuff, and there's all this sort of anger, I can see why he would think that maybe black audiences would not want to see him saved by white people.
Yes, that's exactly what he doesn't say that, but that's kind of the implication here is, and not just white people, but like the sort of white people who have been basically brutalized.
We'll get to, I've got a lot to say about that later.
Yeah.
But also I think there is something symbolic about these white people sort of blindly shooting this black man that I think would have felt very, very affecting in that era.
Yeah.
Because it would have really hit home given all the violence that was happening. And so I think if you want to pander, sure, he gets saved by white people. Honestly, I agree. I think that would have been a worse ending.
Right.
Like as horrible as this ending is, it feels like the ending that should have happened.
I know, if they had been like, and Ben is saved, like it would have undercut the entire fucking movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So using his tire iron, he beats two of them in. Meanwhile, unaware that the back door was open, one of the zombies slowly creeps in, advancing.
The guy in the bathrobe gets it right in the face.
What
an undignified way to die. In your bathrobe with a tire iron through your forehead.
Could have been worse. You could have been the naked zombie.
That's true.
Advancing on Barbara while she doesn't notice. Ben gets to her before it can gets her and stabs it in the head with the sharp end of the iron. Not long.
And he calls it it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is another one of those sort of nice touches where you're like, ooh, I don't like that.
Not long after, another one creeps up on the door. Ben beats it back. And as it recedes, as the camera sort of pulls back, this is another shot that I wanted to fucking point out because he is escalating the danger with a fucking perfect, just simple little camera move where he pulls back, and because all you see at first is just that one zombie coming into the house, and then the zombie sort of stumbles back, and the camera reveals as the shot widens that there's like 6 more of them right behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like exponentially growing.
Right. So yeah, he takes it a minute to drag it out back and sets it on fire, causing the advancing zombies to retreat out of fear.
And man, does that body go up fast. Must be all the polyester.
I was going to say, like, their clothing was just so fucking flammable back then. Because, like, they'll wave, like, a barely lit torch at these zombies, and some of them will just erupt into flame.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. So then he gets to work boarding up the windows and doors with whatever he can find. Doing his best.
She's just fucking wandering around absentmindedly, touching everything, stroking the wall like an idiot.
Yep. She wanders off, finds a creepy horror movie music box.
Really? Yeah. And then she comes back with, because he's like, go find firewood, you dummy. And she comes back with like 2 sticks because she's an idiot.
Yeah. He's like, thanks, I guess.
Well, it's better than what you were doing, just stroking everything you saw.
She does eventually get it together enough to help him, and they get the place fairly secured. As they work, Ben explains his story. He found a truck.
But like up to this point, this is why I find her so annoying. Is like I felt so compelled to just be like, lady, he's talking to you. At least look at him. I don't know, something, anything.
Oh yeah, but the thing is it's not terribly well communicated. Even though she's acting like a fucking baby, she's just traumatized.
And yeah, but they do eventually figure out, like, I guess we have to convey that somehow. But like, if you're an actor, and she was, I mean, she's just sort of blindly wandering. And you're like, you're not selling traumatized or shocked. You're selling developmentally disabled.
That might be like the one sort of like weak spot in the movie is if they were improvising a lot of stuff and her directive was, you're traumatized by what you've experienced so far. Like, this is how she expresses it. And it's just
right. So she's like, right. The miracle worker. Got it.
Yeah. So Ben found a truck at a nearby diner. While he was listening to the radio, a big gas truck drove through with a bunch of zombies hanging onto it and following it. And it crashed suddenly, burst into flames, and the diner was surrounded as the zombies swarmed it. And he had to plow through a crowd of them to get away.
This is the part that I think justifies why he might have said that about the ending, but I think this is also the part that really makes the race element of the movie unavoidable. Because I think the way he's describing this experience at the diner, it's evoking imagery of riots, of burning buildings, of like a lone black man sort of besieged by a mob being surrounded, and they're really going to tear him apart. And you know, we don't know what was written and what was improvised, but he brings that, like, among the entire script, he really brings this moment to life, and it's really impossible to ignore the kind of parallels or what this could be a metaphor for.
Yeah,
it's really super engaging, and you're just like, wow, you can't say this is not about race or it's not about division in some way.
Right. So yeah, Barbara is now inspired to tell her story, but
I want to say because she actually, this is the one moment she's not very good at acting and she's not very good at delivering the story, but the way she recounts this
is very like, we know what happened, but we're hearing her very broken version of it. And it's like a child trying to tell this other guy what happened. And you can only draw the worst conclusions from what she's saying.
Because the way she's talking about it, if we hadn't already seen it, we would assume she's talking about sexual assault. That's the way it sounds. She's saying things like, because so she's saying like, you know, she's focusing on the really mundane aspects of their day. Like he wanted the candy and all this stuff. And she's clearly avoiding the terrible part, or at least delaying getting to the terrible part. And then Ben sort of stops listening to her because she's just rambling. But then the more she rambles, the more she starts saying, He held me. He ripped at my clothes. He wouldn't let me go. And it's like, she's talking about the zombie because we saw it happen. But if you just listen to her words and you put it into the context of this traumatized woman, it sounds like she's describing something else.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of like, here is a thing that happens to women a lot that society sort of writ large, but especially in circumstances like this, nobody would talk about it. Mm-hmm. And so here's this person trying to explain this absolutely terrible thing that has happened that she can't really convey. And he just sort of walks away.
Yeah.
This is like a moment, because this movie is not terribly sophisticated. It is in some ways, but like narratively, it's not terribly sophisticated. John Russo's not a great writer in general, but
no, it's the characters and the circumstances that are really carrying this movie, and the filmmaking that are really carrying. But the story is just it is at its heart
one-dimensional.
Yeah.
And so to have this moment dropped in here, it feels like it's coming out of left field. It's a very compelling moment, and unfortunately, they don't sustain it for very long.
No, because Ben tries to ignore her because she starts to get like, we got to go out and get Johnny. He's out there by himself.
This is what I don't like about his character. And I don't know, maybe you're not supposed to. It's kind of hard to know because, again, writing's not super good. Yeah. But he is very indifferent to her for most of it, if not like hostile towards her. And I get that you would want, you're in this scenario. You if you're that kind of person, you'd be like, come on, bitch, you gotta get it together because we're gonna die if we don't do something. But you would also probably be astute enough to recognize, like, this woman is not okay. I need to stop shouting at her, if only because I need her to help me. And he does sort of do that a little bit, but he constantly just comes back to, I'm going to shout at everybody and I'm the one in charge. And it's like, okay, it just doesn't work. It's a little annoying. It does not endear me to him. And again, maybe we're not supposed to be, but I think we kind of are. It just doesn't work. Like it doesn't help. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like, this is a person who is this kind of commanding presence and is this intelligent. He would notice that that's not going to work with these people in these circumstances. And he would adjust, and he just doesn't. He just kind of keeps shouting at everybody.
It might be a little bit of a sort of a leftover bit of the original Ben character that just sort of stayed in the script.
Yeah, and that's another one of those, that did occur to me. I was like, he was supposed to be this very gruff person. And it's like, he doesn't come across that way.
No, because eventually, like in future sequels, or not even in just the zombie movies, like there's always this kind of character or the kind of hard, kind of, I don't know, gruff type character.
I mean, it's Ken Faree in Dawn.
Yeah, like
he's that character, but you like him a lot more.
He does this a lot in his movies. There's always this one character, and it's also I think maybe he pulls it from like Stephen King. Stephen King's always got this kind of character, and he's a big fan of Stephen King's novels as well. But because what he does is she's very insistent. And it refuses to accept that her brother's probably dead. She slaps him very quickly, and then he punches her, and it knocks her out.
Closed fist punches her in the face,
right in the fucking jaw.
I saw this.
Right in the kisser.
Really, I saw this. We went to see it last year with Morricone. You doing the score, and when this scene happened, like half of the theater laughed. And I don't know if they laughed because it's uncomfortable. Because, I mean, what you're looking at in 1968 is a black man punching a white woman.
I think that context is lost on modern audiences.
Which sucks because that's what makes the moment really impactful.
Yeah, but also it feels very appropriate for the time.
Yeah,
because dudes were always slapping ladies in the movies.
Sometimes you gotta close fist punch a lady because she's got the vapors. It is.
Look, she's clearly on her period.
And we were both like, why are they laughing? And I thought maybe it's because it's kind of an uncomfortable moment, but no, it seemed like they were like, oh man, the 60s. It's like, he didn't lightly slap her, he fucking punches her.
Right. So now he finds a radio in the house and he tunes it until he finds a news station, which is reporting a vague crisis about an epidemic of violence being committed by an army of killers. Ben checks the window, and the situation outside is becoming dire. More zombies are arriving. He douses a chair in lighter fluid and makes a torch out of a table leg and some rags, dragging it outside and setting it on fire to drive the zombies back.
And now you know it's the polyester because that chair goes up even faster.
That chair goes up immediately. The radio reports the entire state is coming under siege from zombies and later implies that the problem is now happening all over the country. Ben finds a rifle in one of the closets, a little ammo to match, and he also brings Barbara some shoes.
Nice. I think it's a nice thing to do.
How do you say I'm
Does
sorry?
she appreciate
sorry
it?
for
No.
punching you in the face? And get you a nice pair of shoes.
Nice pair of dead lady shoes. Works every time.
He explains that the place is boarded up pretty solid with an unboarded up window right behind him in the background. And
Hey, fellas, Valentine's Day is coming up. Why don't you get your lady a nice pair of dead lady shoes?
dead lady shoes, she ain't going to use them. She's dead.
What does she need them for? Happy Valentine's
You got a
Day.
living lady right in front of you that you just punched in the face. He then goes upstairs to deal with the corpse that's up there. When he drags it away, that's Kira Sean.
That he's dragging?
Yeah. So the radio reports that the killers are not just killing their victims, they're also eating them.
Now, here is my question. Is this the first zombie eating people movie?
Yes.
I thought so. And I also thought, is this the first people eating people movie?
No. There have been
I
cannibal.
eat your flesh?
There have been
I eat your
cannibal
flesh, I eat your
movies, or at
skin?
least movies that imply cannibalism up to this point. But
But it's like, again, it's like ritualistic, you know.
yeah, but like this is the very first time that like this sort of monster has really appeared.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Because yeah, they thought about it. They were like, well, what do these things do? Do they just kill you? Because like I mean, you like we've seen these sorts of monsters in other movies, and what do they do in those movies? They always they choke their victim to death.
Yeah. Well, that's how you kill everybody up to 1967.
Right after that, it was everybody's ball game. You could eat a motherfucker. But yeah, they thought like, well, how do we like what do they do? And they're like, well, I mean, they don't just kill you; they eat you. And they're like, oh shit, that's good. Write that down.
That's nice. You should write that down.
So when Ben is occupied upstairs, Barbara notices the basement door slowly opening. Suspecting zombies, she gets up to run, but two living men burst from the door and grab her.
Not innocent men.
Not innocent men. Nope. Ben runs downstairs to find two more survivors, Harry and Tom, who've been hidden out in the basement since before Barbara even entered the house.
And this introduces the main antagonist of both the film and real life, the middle-class straight white guy.
Right. Ben can't believe that he didn't come up to help. So Harry is a cowardly jerk, insisting that the cellar is the safest place in the house. Harry's wife and daughter are also down in the basement. The little girl is hurt. Tom and Ben argue that the cellar is a bad spot to hide. One door to protect, but nowhere to run if those things get in the basement.
Seriously, it's the worst possible place. Under the bed is the last place you want to be in a fire, Daffy.
So Harry resolves to go back down, but he's boarding up the door behind him when he goes. So
Now, Harry's whole thing is like, it's not really about safety. It's more about him being right and being in charge, which again, when you add the race element of it, the whole thing becomes about something else.
yeah, they don't hit you over the head with it, but really the core of the tension is, am I really going to sit here and listen to this black guy?
Right. And like Harry ultimately, and this is something his wife sort of hints at, is like Harry is afraid, but he can't admit that he's afraid, and he wants to be in charge and he wants to be right. And so he's sort of just like, he's being extremely reckless to that end, which is like a fucking horror trope through and through all time. But
Okay, this is he is the classic. He is the classic zombie movie villain. Every cheap knockoff has this character in it. It's either he's the guy who's going to get everybody killed with bad decisions, or he's the guy who's hiding out that he's been bitten.
yeah.
Until the absolute worst, point at the crescendo of the movie.
Yeah, but again, I think it's interesting that like we're in 1968 introducing this character of like you are a man, you're a white man, and you can't admit that you are afraid and don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And that's not, I guess, not something you really would have seen at the time.
Nope. So now Ben goes to check out back for more of those things, because they go out, they look out the windows, and they just see even more of them showing up.
And this, you can tell, this is an obvious Carnival of Souls influence.
Oh, yeah, they have the sort of really, really, really pasty light skin and like the darkened eyes. Like they haven't, none of the really messed up ones have shown up yet.
Yeah.
They suddenly reach through the boarded up window as he goes, and they grab him. And Ben manages,
very Resident Evil 2.
Right. Ben manages to turn the gun on one and shoots, but it doesn't stop it. There are some people who believe that this is the first recorded use of squibs.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm trying to think of it, and I can't really think of other movies that use squibs before.
I mean, there are hundreds of movies that come before, thousands probably.
I don't know about squibs, but yeah. I mean, I don't know if I fucking believe that, but
could they have afforded squibs at all?
Well, yeah, it's just smokeless powder and balloons.
I feel like someone would have gotten killed.
And the special effects guys were who were handling those in the pyro were fireworks guys.
You know who was supposed to do the special effects for this?
Tom Savini.
Tom Savini. But he had been shipped off to Vietnam.
Yep, our friend Tom Savini, fan of the show.
Yeah.
Not really.
Well, he hates you, that's for sure.
Yeah, several shots just pass through the zombies. He puts it down for good when he lands a headshot, but the noise draws even more of them. So Harry finally resolves to go downstairs for good, but Tom stops him, calls his girlfriend Judy up before he bars the door.
Now, Judy's what you call a hip chick.
I like Judy.
Just two young lovers.
Yep. Down in the basement, we meet Helen, Harry's wife, and his daughter, who is unconscious.
I like Helen because she's super resentful.
She is a bitter.
She's sassy.
If you had to be married to that motherfucker, you would be like Helen.
Oh, yeah. She clearly hates. I mean, she basically was like, I don't want to stay married to you, but I don't want to die with you either. She's actually, I think she's pretty good for not being an actor.
Exactly. Like, that's the thing. Like these people who are just like not actors, they do all right. And some of them do better than others.
I mean, if someone asked me like, hey, can you be, we need someone to be in this movie, I would, if I said yes, and that would be a hard no, but I would be terrible. I did
some student film stuff when I was in school, and I was the fucking worst. I'm like, I don't know what to do with my hands. My face I would make weird faces when I'm doing my lines and shit. It's just, I'm the worst. You don't want me in a movie.
I mean, you did make that one lady pee her pants at the haunted house.
This is true. I am a good okay. Put me in a movie as a monster, and I'm fucking badass.
You should try and make people pee their pants just on the sidewalk.
That's my thing. If you need somebody to pee their pants, you call me. I'll make them all pee their pants. So yeah, the little girl's hurt. Tom and Ben argue that the cellar is a bad spot to hide. Okay.
This is where we get the real hard cut on the first one is on the stairs when she's talking to Tom. I think because he's downstairs like smoking a cigarette. She's like, I fucking hate you. This is all your fault.
Yeah.
And then she's like, wait, they have a radio?
Right.
You dumbass.
Stupid motherfucker.
Yeah. And so she's like, I'm going upstairs. Fuck you. And then she's like, they're on the stairs arguing. And all of a sudden there's like this really, really hard cut. It's clear they had to cut out a big chunk of dialogue.
Yeah. Walter Reed was like, the scene is way too chatty. Apparently it's like 10 minutes of them just sniping at each other. And like exposition and background about them.
I mean, I don't want to side with Walter Reed on this one, but
it was a
shit about these two.
So yeah, Helen can't believe that Harry trapped them down in the basement when she finds out there's a radio up there with information about what's happening. Tom calls down to them that Ben found a TV in the house, and Helen makes a deal to open the door and come up while Judy goes back down to watch the girl. And so now Ben and Tom bring the TV down. They set it up, receiving a broadcast which informs them that the entire East Coast is now overrun.
This is local horror host. Is that this guy?
No, that's the Chili Billy is the guy who's on.
Oh, he's the roving reporter.
Yeah, this guy is just another actor. So yeah, the facts have been established. The killers are the living dead. They're coming back to life and eating whatever living person they can get their hands on. And the reporter also recommends that survivors make their way to a series of listed rescue stations.
Yeah, something Venus satellites,
That's a little ways out still. Oh, it's right after this. But if they can get some, the plan changes. If they can get some gas in the truck that Ben arrived in, they can get to one of those stations, which is right nearby. They say Willard, I think, is the one. They're like, it's like 7 miles away.
Oh, is this when they also show the interview with the guys getting in the car?
No, it's coming up. Yeah. So the reporter tells a story about a possible cause for the epidemic. Space probe sent to Venus was recently destroyed on re-entry to Earth when it was found to be carrying a sort of radiation with it. The parts showered down on the Earth, and it's possible that this caused the dead to rise. The reporters on the street in D.C. try to get a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to comment on the Venus situation, but they're evasive. And then a scientist on TV.
I love this part because when they're getting in the car, he says there will be a reply later. But the way he says later is he's getting in the car and he's like, later. Like, bye.
Yeah. And then a scientist on TV informs the reporter that it takes only minutes for the dead to reanimate. So one of the listed rescue stations pretty close to the farmhouse. Helen goes back down to check on Karen, the little girl, who is unconscious now. Upstairs, they start to make a plan for how to get to the gas pump. There's a key ring downstairs that might go to the gas pump out by the barn. They can force the zombies back with fire. Now everything's coming up Millhouse. Surely nothing could go wrong.
Not at all. Because they're like, we'll make Molotov cocktails. And thank God for folksy people, because they just got mason jars upon mason jars.
So Tom volunteers to drive while Ben backs him up. Everyone sets to making Molotov cocktails. Judy and Tom have this moment. They argue about him going out to the pump. It's a big risk.
I don't know if it was me. I don't know that I would trust one of the most important jobs to the guy you are pretty sure is going to fuck you over.
Right.
Because they're like, Harry, here, you fend off the zombies while we run. He's like, yeah, I'll fend off the zombies while you run.
Yep. So everybody heads downstairs while they prep to make the run to the gas pump. Ben and Tom pull the boards off the door while Harry goes upstairs to drop cocktails on the zombies. And then as soon as the action starts, the zombies turn toward the house. There's a lot of them out there now. Yeah. But the fire is effective at forcing them back. Several of them catch fire even. And as soon as the door opens, Ben and Tom...
One of them in real life.
Yeah. Ben and Tom run out. They're immediately set on by like a dozen of them. Then Judy, for some fucking reason, suddenly runs outside as Harry closes the door behind her. And
God damn it, Judy, you dummy.
I know. And then they all pile into the truck and get going as the zombies advance on them. When they get to the pump, Tom tries the key, but it doesn't work. So Ben shoots the lock off, and then gas sprays from the pump onto the truck, and their torch sets it up.
All of this seems like things are not going well.
Definitely things are not coming up Millhouse at all.
And for some reason, they jump in the truck.
Yeah, well, they get in because they don't want the fire to sort of like ignite the truck. They don't realize that the truck is on fire already. So they drive it away to sort of keep it safe. But I think the tension of this scene is fucking incredible. It's unbearable. Like if you've never seen it before, it is unreal. Like, are they going to fucking make it? No, they don't.
It also breaks up the sort of monotony of being in one location the whole time.
Right. Because like also they sound really, really optimistic. They're like, we're going to get out there. We're going to force them back with fire and Molotov cocktails will push them back. We'll get in the truck. We'll get gas. We'll get the fuck out of here. But as soon as they get out there, they're like, holy shit, there are way more of these things than we ever thought.
You know what it is? It's the closing the doors truck scene from Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah. Also, it makes me think of the sort of the finale from The Birds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like the very end when they go outside and she's like, no.
Yeah. Because they have to like very, very carefully, very slowly get to the truck, which is like surrounded by like thousands of birds. Mm-hmm. And so Tom and Judy drive the burning truck away, but it stalls some distance and it suddenly explodes, killing them both.
And they reach it. It's like tragic and hilarious end.
Ben is left out on his own in the middle of the mob, but he manages to run back to the house. And he arrives to find the door locked as ordered. But he kicks in the door and he finds Harry about to close himself up in the basement again. But Harry suddenly changes his mind and helps him board up the front door behind him. And when they're finished, Ben turns on Harry and beats the fucking crap out of him.
It is fantastic.
It is beautiful.
Time to murder Harry for his betrayal.
Right. Outside, the soundtrack turns nasty. I fucking love the music in this.
It's all just stock music.
It's just stock stuff, but there's this stuff that they do that's like drippy, and they use a lot of heavy echoplex on it that is just so fucking disturbing.
So some of it was the guy who plays Harry. He did, I think, some of the stuff at the end.
Yep.
There's parts that sound less like stock music and more just like soundscape.
It's the soundscape stuff that it's really psychedelic and echoey.
I think that's all him.
And like super buzzy and minor chord shit. Like it's just, it perfectly communicates to you that this is fucked up and something really bad is happening. Because now like the zombies like drag the bodies out of the truck and tear them apart and eat them. When I first saw this scene bummed me out.
Well, I mean, and what they're actually eating is ham covered in chocolate sauce.
That's right. We get a long George Romero scene of zombies fighting over the intestines and organs. That's the stuff that bums me out.
Yeah.
Because I'd never seen
never
seen anything like that. And I was like, oh,
well,
God.
imagine it's 1968. You just wanted to see Peter Cushing be Doctor Who.
Right.
Nobody's eating anybody in Doctor Who.
Nope. We get close-ups of them eating the flesh from the bones. Inside the house, Ben is sickened by what he sees. And the thing is like, later on, he is like, Romero's going to like, this is going to be his thing with the zombies, is there's always a zombie like flesh feast, and they get longer and more, and like just even more explicit, up to the point where like the end of Day of the Dead is so fucking gory and gross, and like what a fucking bummer that ending is.
But in Day of the Dead, though, there is humor in that.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of humor in there's a lot of humor in Dawn of the Dead that offset all this violence. There's no humor in this. And you like Tom and Judy throughout the movie. Like they're sort of the most likable, most endearing characters.
Yeah, because they're just kids.
Even though they don't have a lot of lines, but like you do sort of like them because they're not gruff like Ben. They're not shitty like Harry. And so they're kind of middle ground. And so like you're watching them get eaten. It's tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's no goofy goblin soundtrack. There's no pie fights.
Yeah. No. So Helen comes up, and Harry tells them all that Karen, the girl, was bitten by one of those things as they ran from them. Barbara, still out of her mind. The TV reporter shows footage of a local hunting party made up of cops and heavily armed hicks.
This is another one. Like, this is the part that, again, in that context of the era, like, seeing this kind of militia is, it would evoke some kind of imagery in the audience's imagination, that's for sure. I mean, even the chief has, or I think it's the chief or the mayor or whatever, he has a vaguely Southern accent, though he is definitely from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, yeah. He was I think he's like the production manager for this movie.
I mean, so he would offer you a glass of water. That's for sure. He'd go and get it at the Wawa and get you some water. But he says, we came over and beat him off, blasted him down. All right.
Yeah.
Fella.
Yep. The reporter is Bill Cardile. He's the father of Laurie Cardile from Day of the Dead. In Pittsburgh, he was known as Chilly Billy. And he was he was a horror host. He was the host of Chiller Theater. Chiller Theater is what it was called.
Yeah. Just didn't even appreciate my Chilly Willy joke.
To be honest, you dropped out in the Zoom, so I missed it.
That's too bad. Too bad.
All of a sudden, the power goes out in the house. Ben goes to the basement to check the fuses, and while he's gone, Harry conspires to take the gun from him.
Oh, it's a bad idea.
Outside, the zombies are done with Tom and Judy and are starting to swarm the house, beating on the doors and windows, reaching through the gaps. It's getting real bad. Ben drops the gun to hold the barricade, and Harry seizes the opportunity to grab the gun. He commands Helen to get it in the cellar, and in the confusion, he drops the gun again. Ben picks it up, and he shoots Harry. While
doesn't even hesitate.
Nope. Grabs it. Bow. This guy is just going to become an even bigger problem if he doesn't fucking deal with him.
Yeah, he's a liability. He has to go. I get it. But man, things go to hell in this movie pretty quickly.
I always forget how fast this movie falls apart.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Harry stumbles into the basement where Karen now lies dead, and he also dies. So Helen manages to break free of the zombies with the help from Barbara, who finally pulls it together. Now Helen runs to the basement to find Karen eating Harry's remains.
Nice.
There you go.
Love it.
How you like that, kids, at the Doctor Who movie? Mm-hmm. As she advances on her mother, who trips, Karen uses a trowel to stab her mother repeatedly to a horribly echoplexed scream.
It is rough, and that sound is really bizarre and unnerving.
Yeah.
And she's like, when she stops stabbing her, she just leaves the trowel in her.
Yep. Upstairs, Ben and Barbara struggle to keep the zombies back, but it's a losing battle. They break through the door, and the first one through is the walking corpse of Johnny, who grabs Barbara.
I gotta say, I think Johnny looks better as a zombie than he did when he was alive.
Oh, yeah, take those glasses off. Handsome dude. Handsome dead guy.
I'm more into him now than I was before.
You love a dead guy.
I do. Canadians and dead guys. What can I say?
He drags her out to the mob to her horrible demise. Pushed back by the mob, Ben retreats, pushing the walking corpse of Karen aside, makes it to the basement, barring the door behind him as the mob enters the house, bashing themselves against the door. Alone with the rifle, he finds the corpses of Harry and Helen, shoots them as they rise, and then retreats to a corner for his last stand.
Now, why does the basement have such a seriously reinforced door?
I have no clue, man. No idea why.
I mean, that thing is like a fortress.
Yeah, like they put 3 bars across it. Nobody getting through there.
No. And I do like that he gets to shoot Harry for a second time. Like, it's satisfying for the character, but also for us.
Yeah, I've never thought of that. So upstairs, the zombies mill around and then cut to morning. It's quiet, and they seem to have lost interest in the house. A helicopter flies overhead. The hunters are nearing the house. Turns out that when they were broadcasting on the scene, the hunters were right next to the house in one of Romero's signature details of cruel irony.
Mm-hmm.
They arrive to find a few zombies on the scene and easily deal with them. Ben, still in the basement, hears the dogs and gunshots, ventures upstairs to see what he can see. The hunters are outside building a bonfire. He looks through the boards, and one of the hunters spots the movement but doesn't see Ben, so they line up the shot and shoot him dead where he stands. The last thing we see are still photos of the hunters dragging his body out of the house with hooks and throwing it on the pile of corpses as the credits roll. As they end, the pile of bodies is lit up. Cut to black.
And look, the image of them tossing the body of a black man onto the fire, it's a real yikes-a-roo.
It looks...
Is what you got right there.
Like if you've ever seen like fucking photos of lynchings and shit, it's definitely meant to invoke that kind of thing.
And so again, this is this idea of like, well, no, this is no metaphor. Like, fuck off, man.
Yeah. What a fucking movie. Like, I am always impressed by just how completely it leans into that ending.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I think this one actually ages better. Like, it has gotten better. Like, even if we pretend that he wasn't trying to convey any kind of social message or political message, it's so easy to read one into it. And it's a message that is sort of unfortunately consistently relevant about sort of turning on each other and how easy it is. And like, but even aside from a postmodern take on the movie, it's still super important to the genre. You know, it sort of transformed the monster. It elevates horror in a new way. It makes horror something that is no longer just for children. And it's just a fucking good movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is essentially, it's just a bottle. It's like it takes place mostly in this one location. There's a couple of spots where we journey outward and there is, it's got kind of like a multi-dimensional approach to the tension. Like there's this whole, struggle happening inside as this like really, really horrible thing is happening on the outside that's just like growing in intensity. The inevitability is just constantly looming over you as you watch this movie. And then there's that moment when the truck explodes, you're like, oh, they're all fucked. Nobody's escaping this. I'm
surprised they've never tried to do this on stage because it lends itself pretty well.
There was actually in 2013, there was a stage production of this in England, I think.
Oh, that's the British.
I know.
There was also a text-based video game.
No shit. Oh, that's right. For like the Commodore 64.
Yeah. It was for like the Commodore knockoff, but yeah.
Yeah.
Fucking. Yeah. It's a great movie. This Criterion edition, they'd have the MoMA transfer that looks really great. They pack the fucking release full of stuff. I mean, if you want to see this movie in like the as best condition as you can, get that release. It's totally worth it. I was surprised when we saw this last year. We went to Coolidge to see it, even though, I mean, that was obviously a special event. It was Morricone Youth. It was about them, not the movie. But there were so many people in the theater who you could just, if you were paying attention as everyone was leaving, who had never seen it before. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I would, were I a social person, I would have asked them what they thought about it.
Yeah.
Instead, I just glared at them.
Get out of my way. I'm trying to go home.
How dare you?
But yeah, Jesus H. Christ, man. Fucking Night of the Living Dead. What a movie.
Banger.
It sticks with you. And honestly, I think that I can, it's flawed. It's a low budget movie. It was made by people who are mostly not actors. It was a first time feature. I definitely think that they kind of got in over their heads in making this, but the end result I think it's a perfect movie. Like it holds up extremely well. I think it is definitely the one of the three. I don't talk about the other ones. I'm not interested in those other sequels.
No, there's three of them. I don't give a shit about the rest.
But it is the one that I think ages the best. It is the one that I think holds up the best.
Mm-hmm. Because I think he was taking it very, very seriously. Whereas the other ones, he was like, all right, I got more money. I can play around. I can be funny or whatever. But this was just like, nope, going to give you something you've never seen before.
Right. Laser focused on pure novelty. And it works. It
reminds me of when we did, I saw the TV Glow. It's the kind of thing where like you watch the movie and you're like, this is not a perfect movie. It's a very, very good movie, but you can tell this is a person who's doing something special.
Yeah.
And they will go on to do better things, but they will not make anything that is quite as special.
Yeah. This is a singular moment like that. The rarest occasion when they just knock it out of the park on their first try.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Changed everything. This was a singularity in horror.
Yeah.
Goddamn fucking what a movie, man.
Well, to 2 years of this goddamn podcast.
to 2 years, to two more. So speaking of the future, what's next?
Well, 99-cent rental will return next week with Baby Cart, Sort of Vengeance. You know who loves those movies?
Both of us.
I particularly do. I'll tell you, here's how much I love them. I was thinking one time, if I could rewatch any collection of movies, any, what do you call it? For like a franchise?
Sure.
For the first time again, it would be that.
No shit. Have you ever read that? Have you ever read the manga?
I'm not a manga person.
All right.
I enjoy a comic book and a graphic novel, but for some reason I have a hard time with those.
All right. They're really good. Yeah. But
we're coming back with that.
But how about
real good?
How about Bring Me the Axe?
Bring Me the Axe in 2 weeks. It's going to be Women's History Month. And so I decided we're going to celebrate Women's History Month with Slumber Party Massacre. It is written by and directed by a woman.
Yeah.
Well, two different women, but
yeah. But it's, you say, Women's History Month, feminism. Here's Slumber Party Massacre.
It was supposed to be something entirely different, but it did not end up that way. But we're going to talk all about it, and I think we are going to have a guest.
Yep. So, all right, yeah, be back here in a week for Baby Cart, and be back in 2 for Slumber Party Massacre.
Mm-hmm.